Welcome everyone to Rehab 2030, the playbook, as we speak about the future of the industry and how the industry would look like by 2030. We want to make sure that we address different topics from operation, finance, rehab, and so on. One of the most important topics is our reimbursements and what's happening up the hill in Washington. Today we have a very special guest who spent years into advocacy, Michael Matlack is the director at APTA for the PT-PAC. Michael, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Michael, I recently attended the two-day event at the Capitol Hill, and I think it bombarded me with a lot of information that some I might not been aware of. And I was enthusiastic by the amount of effort that we need to put to make sure that we continue to push our profession forward. So I think you've been in the trenches for a very long time. If we could start by giving a little bit about your background and then what you actually do right now.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm the director of our political action committee, but I'm also one of the lobbyists for APTA. Go up on Capitol Hill, talking about the issues that affect the profession. Also oversee our grassroots operation here and how our members can get involved in the legislative and political process, which is really important. We do have other lobbyists here, but it's really important that we have our members and our patients be able to educate our members of Congress about the issues of concerns of the profession and how it affects their constituents. Most members of Congress and even their congressional staff have no idea about the training that physical therapists and physical therapist assistants go through and what you do unless they've experienced PT themselves. Or if they have a family member who's experienced needed physical therapy. So it's so important that we as a profession make sure that we are voicing our concerns to them and educating them about healthcare policy. Because there's many times if we're not there, we are left out of the equation. And I was just with a member of Congress this morning on behalf of PT-PAC, talking about what's next in the sense of Medicare payment reform and what some of the concerns of the profession. And like I said, there are no physical therapists in Congress today. Okay. There's tons of physicians up there, and some of them hear our concerns. Some of them are very focused on what they know, which is more in the physician world. And so it's really important that we build those relationships with members of Congress and their staff through our lobbyists and through those avenues that PT-PAC provides, the opportunities to speak with them. So it is really important that we have those avenues in that regard.
Where are we as a profession compared to others when it comes to advocacy? Comparing to, you mentioned there are physicians who might have more leverage because they have people in the Congress and what. Where do we stand in that equation?
Yeah, definitely in regards of where we stand, and I'll just talk really at the federal level, is that we are in good position, I would say, in the non-physician community. In the sense of the rehab community, I would say that we are number one in the sense of the number of lobbyists up there, how large our PAC is, which allows us to have that connection with members of Congress in that regard. Now, in regards to the physician world, and this is where the competition kind of occurs, is that they have more influence is because they have more members, they have more money behind them in a sense to promote their issues. But one thing we have, I think, that is really different than and has changed over the years is we spend more time with our patients. We see more patients, right, than other communities. And we build that relationship with that patient. So really that can be our special weapon, I guess you could say, is not only ourselves talking to members of Congress, but getting our patients to do that too, to be an advocate for us on certain issues that they can articulate with their members of Congress and their healthcare staff. That's one thing that we have towards our benefit, and how much this affects their constituents. That time that we spend, because you'd be surprised the many times that I go up on Capitol Hill and I am in a fundraiser with a member of Congress and other lobbyists. Before I even say a word, they say, "Oh, I love physical therapists. I love what you do. You did this or that for me or a family member. You guys are just great." So before we even say a word, our reputation as a profession has set us up well in that regard. So that is very helpful. But in the sense of the money, I guess you could say, in the sense of how much is put forth and what is available to us, that puts us a little bit behind the eight ball compared to some of the physician groups.
Do you feel, you mentioned a little bit about the Medicare reform, and then I guess I would say priorities of different professions. As I understand the Medicare reform, the fee schedule of physician Medicare reform is a concern for everyone. Is there a way that we could potentially have that as the #1 priority and just have all professions dance around it and tackle it from different angles?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of APTA, payment is #1, as a #1 priority of this association. It has been, but we stated it at last year's House of Delegates, and our board, and even our whole strategic framework that was just created and goes for the next 5 years. That is our #1 priority. There's no question about that. We hear that from our members. That is where our focus needs to be, because we know if we're not paid appropriately, we're not going to have a profession anymore. Why would people go into physical therapy if they're not getting paid appropriately for what they do? And so there's many things going on right now in the sense, and you were there for Hill Day, the many issues we're talking about in the sense of repealing MPPR, which is a huge cut, which is totally unfounded in that regard. Every time that we build multiple codes and having a cut because we build multiple codes on the practice expense part of it, getting rid of that. I was just like I said, I was just at a fundraiser today with a member of Congress who's a physician, and their staff mentioned it, about me saying a word. So the word is getting out there, how this is affecting us. Also, of course, having a inflationary index, MEI, for outpatient clinics. As we know, in other settings, they have some kind of inflationary index, but we don't have it for outpatient under the Medicare physician fee schedule. Getting that moving forward. In fact, there was a hearing just this week in the House Ways and Means Committee about there was a piece of legislation to give us MEI, and so we could have a yearly increase based on inflation. So that is moving. So that's encouraging in that regard. Also, there's some issues regarding budget neutrality, which is the vein of our existence. And people don't know what that is. Basically, if the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services determines that, okay, a certain profession, based on surveys, based on data, that they should get paid more, okay, which in many instances we're not going to argue about if they should or should not. But the problem, what happens is, if you increase for one profession, you have to take it out of the hides of other professions. Mm-hmm. So there's legislation to increase the threshold, so that wouldn't occur, and that would be very beneficial. Because it makes no sense to increase for someone in their codes, and some codes that we don't even bill, to take it out of our codes and us get a payment cut. And that's kind of the situation we're in right now. Is people may or may not know that on January 1st, if Congress does nothing, we're going to be hit with a 2.5% cut. And that was all because of the budget neutrality issue that occurred a couple years ago. So passing legislation in that regard. So you're talking about, budget neutrality, MEI, MPPR. Also, another thing that we're working on, and we'll see some legislation hopefully next month about this, is it's very hard for us to participate in MIPS or APMs, and that's because the setup that they created doesn't have, it's really for physicians, the way they set it up, and it has no benefits how they can do it for physical therapists. So we're hoping to change that to help us in payment and get increases, because we can show quality, right?
Yes.
We're all about that, And so there's some things coming, and we have a short window, to get things passed before the election, but things are definitely rolling.
So I'm just gonna throw a thought out here, and I would like to hear your comments about it. So basically, a few years ago, maybe 10, a little bit more, we got the direct access, and then now there is a lot of talks. I don't know why now; it should have been sooner, but a lot of talks about PTs as primary care for musculoskeletal, right? And the model works. In our practice, more than 75% of the patients are coming to us firsthand. A lot of other practices around the country that I know are doing the same at the moment. So from a complete economical perspective, that's a better value for dollar to the overall economy of the Medicare. Where's the issue there? Where's the if everybody is winning in a certain scenario where PTs get paid fairly for what they do, you give more access to patients, you improve the overall outcome of the budget. What am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, we've been fighting this direct access battle for many years
Yes.
at the state level, and you mentioned our success at the federal level recently. It's not 100% direct access. You still, if someone comes us directly under Medicare to us, we still need that. Sign up for the plan of care from the physician if they come to us first. And so it's not 100% direct access. And where that comes in, why we don't, is that, and this is even at the state level that we had to fight for many years, there is a subset of the physician community who still wants control, who still feel they got to see us first. The PTs are going to miss something, even though many times that it's the physician that misses something, and we have to refer back to them. Hey, you need to look at this, this, and that.
Yes.
So it's just, it's all about control, and unfortunately, but I would say in the last few years, we have been working a lot better with physicians. They see how we help their patients. They see how we are educated and that we are, very much qualified to be able to do this. So I think it's just, as more and more, I would say the old time physicians are retiring.
Okay.
I think that opens up more doors and the ability to bring down some of these barriers that come our way. And that's one of them in the sense of under Medicare, that we haven't got 100% there, but we're almost there, and we're continuing to strive to take away all those additional barriers to care.
From a complete data point, there is more patients than the physician and physical therapist combined could see. So, it's a matter of just access. So assuming they feel like, there is that extra layer of supervision, if you might say, that is needed. But, some patients are not getting care at all because of that kind of the argument.
Right. I agree with
you. Now let me go a little deeper into the reimbursement issue, because as I think and I believe you agree, it's an existential threat to the industry. After we go through the Medicare, how does that work with the Advantage plans? How does that work with the Medicaid plans? How does that work at a state and commercial levels? People see copays going very high, deductible going very high, that it's almost as if they don't have an insurance. How do you see, what can we do there with reforming the Medicare impact that, or do we need to do different efforts for that angle of the conversation?
Right. I mean, I think one thing that we're seeing, I hear this from our members a lot, is uh, the challenges with Medicare Advantage in the sense of I've heard from our members that, that they will not see as many Medicare Advantage patients as they see traditional Medicare because Medicare Advantage can have reimbursement rates less than traditional Medicare. So it
Yes.
becomes a whole access to care issue for those Medicare Advantage patients. And, it's just how Medicare Advantage is set up. And of course, the patient doesn't know that.
Yeah.
They're thinking they're getting all this extra stuff by
Yes.
joining in, and they find out when they really need care that it's not going to be
Nothing is
as
covered.
easy as available to them. And I think a lot of it is I don't think even members of Congress know that.
Okay.
I don't even realize in that regard. So Medicare Advantage is definitely getting more and more of a microscope on them because they are every year they are asking for more and more money from the federal government to
Yes.
keep them going. And we know why because they want to continue to get profits and but members of Congress are saying, this is not all it's cracked up to be, and
Yeah.
that's not. It's about how much they're getting, but also access to care, also about prior authorization because they're some of the worst offenders in that regards. So all those things, and I think for us as physical therapists, it's really our job to, and me as representing profession, we got to educate our members of Congress. We got to educate the health staff because if we're not doing it, they don't realize this is going on. They don't realize that there's access to care problem. They don't realize that we're getting paid less than traditional Medicare,
Yeah.
for various Medicare Advantage plans. And so that's where really, really important that we are sharing our voice with members. I know that takes extra time. I know for some therapists that they don't feel comfortable doing that, right? Because you're
Yeah.
trying to be a PT, not a lobbyist in a sense. But showing up is half the battle, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't guarantee the outcome what you want, but not showing up guarantees you won't get it.
Any outcomes.
And so we got to show up. We got to do our best in that regard. And everything. And I think you notice everything trickles down.
Yes.
So whatever Medicare does, private insurance will follow.
Okay.
And so if there's a cut or there's a benefit that we get in traditional Medicare, eventually, usually private insurance follows.
Well,
So that could be to our detriment or to our gain.
talking about private insurances, and I just want to throw it out here, there is a sense that goes through a lot of operators that it's almost impossible to hold them accountable. So who are they accountable to? Like the Medicare budget, they're accountable to our representatives in the Congress and up the Capitol. But the insurance companies, at a lot of times, they hold their panel of providers accountable to a level of accountability they are not held to. So you feel at some point there is almost a scheme happening to push the patient away from getting care. How could they be held accountable from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I look more at the federal level, but I do know at the state level, I think a couple of things that can be done. It's definitely look with your state chapter,
Okay.
because they're the ones who are very involved at the private insurance level. But so we have within APTA, we do have a department who deals with on the private insurance side. So definitely we can be involved to help out. I also know many states have what they call a insurance commissioner to when there's problems with different private insurance plans to talk to them. And I would really encourage working with your state chapter because usually there is a reimbursement chair that is someone that was appointed by the state chapter president and a state legislative chair, and they all work together. But to really talk to them, and if you have an issue, definitely be involved with your state chapter and those people. And also here, like I said, we have a private payment division that just works for private insurance.
Okay.
You know, we have a group that just does, you know, federal and in the sense of Medicare and federal programs on payment issues. And then we have a group here who also does. So it's a group effort, you know, but there are definitely people within the state and here at APTA that can work with individuals who are having problems or just, hey, this is what's going on. I just want you to know that this is happening so we can follow up on it.
I want to move to a different big topic, which is students. There's two angles I would love to get your perspective on. One, the student loans, and then two is the quality of the graduates. Now we hear there are some schools who have empty seats, which is understandable. People go out with six-figure loans, and then their salaries is not keeping up with that. So I would love to hear your perspective. Let's start with the student loans. Where do you think this would stand? How do you think that would impact the industry in the long term, especially that the supply demand is already flipped at the moment? So again, it comes to become more of an existential threat that we would love to, understand how we could collectively as an industry go through it.
Yeah, you're talking about the professional degree status for federal student loans issue that came up, as part of the BBB, which is what was passed earlier this year. And then that created a committee to look at federal student loans in general. And that committee made a recommendation, and and then it was a proposed rule that came out, but basically said that a whole bunch of professions, a lot of healthcare, but even some that were not healthcare, can no longer be a part of the professional degree status, and you will now be pushed down a level, basically, to the graduate level. And so that meant basically where we were again, $50,000 per year in loan and $200,000 cumulative, down to $20,000 per year. And so, as we all know, that is not even close how much it costs to go to physical therapy school. Now, we all agree that going to physical therapy cost is too high. There's no doubt about that, but this is not the way to tackle the problem, because as I have talked to many people about this, is that once you, and this has now become final, July 1st is when it goes into effect, that when this does go into effect, and even before, students are looking at this when they're considering going into different professions. How much I can get in student loan, right? How much am I getting paid? How much can I get, student loan forgiveness after I get out of school? All those things. And they're comparing it with other professions. Now, if we lose this ability, starting July 1st, there's going to be people who really want to go to our profession, but they're going to say, I just can't do it. I can't pay for this. Where am I going to get the money from? And I think what really is going to happen is that maybe not initially, but definitely, as you mentioned, more and more slots will not be filled. And what will the schools do? I do not think that they are going to all of a sudden lower the cost, because each program within a university or college has to raise so much money to be viable, right? And that's why they set that amount of money. I think what is more likely going to happen at some point, they're just going to get rid of the physical therapy program.
Yeah.
And so we don't have enough PTs as it is, and this will only exacerbate the problem. So we're talking to members of Congress about this. And like I said, it's a whole bunch of professions that are impacted by this.
Yes.
And it's funny when I go to an event with there's maybe 20 people in the room with a member of Congress, and I bring this up, then there's like 3 or 4 people within that crowd who say, we're impacted by that too.
Yeah.
And it's not just the healthcare arena. It's CPAs, there's architects, it's all over the board. Okay. So I think they really didn't realize how much this was going to impact a whole bunch of professions. And it is very scary. I think most members of Congress that I talk to are on our side about this. It's just coming. There's multiple bills in Congress on the House and Senate side that support the status quo that we had before this. And why would we make it less affordable to go into these different professions that we need, that we don't have enough of? So it is very concerning. And the question is that the good thing is if you're enrolled prior to July 1st, then you're grandfathered.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of programs are trying to figure out how to get all their students enrolled before July 1st.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they have maybe 9 months to a year to hopefully for us to fix this or figure out something else. So, but it is very concerning, and you know, it's really going to hurt our pipeline and ultimately access to care, right? Yeah. You know, if you don't have enough therapists, and we're working with many different groups, we're working with coalitions. Like I mentioned, many groups are affected by this, and it is very concerning. You know, when the demand is so high. Yeah.
I guess my follow-up question to that, like, you know, how do you see things by 2030? Like, you know, if we're challenged on the supply demand, if we're challenged on the reimbursement, how do you see the practices surviving and thriving for 2030 and beyond? What would be your thought? What's the uncomfortable truth here that we need to?
Yeah, I guess I've been with APTA for 27 years. I know I don't look it, but what I have observed over really the past 10 years, I would say, more of the private practice that maybe have 1, 2, 3 clinics are selling out to the bigger groups. And just because it's just harder to survive based on payment, based on regulations, and it's just a lot harder, you know, and they love what they did, but it happens like that. And so sometimes, you know, the corporates buy it up and then for whatever reason in certain communities that they can't make it work, right? And they don't see it as viable or whatever. And so these clinics, you know, close. And so you're seeing more, I think more and more areas have a lack of physical therapy in their areas, you know. And, you know, we have some legislation to deal with rural and underserved areas and things of that sort. But I think that's the scary thing that could happen by 2030. More and more people not have access to care. You know, I think hopefully, as I said, there's a lot of things going on with payment right now. And the good thing about the payment issue is it's not just PTs. You know, it is all the professions who get paid under Medicare who are having this problem. And members of Congress realize that the biggest challenge is the way Congress looks at it is how much it costs, right? You know, hey, if we make these changes, we give more money to them, even though they deserve it, things like we got to find money from somewhere else to pay for this. And that's always the issue. And I've been around long enough that I fought the 20-year battle on the Medicare therapy cap. You know, that was an issue that everyone agreed with us on. We had majority of co-sponsors to repeal the therapy cap. But every year, even though we could show, hey, if people get therapy, it's gonna save us money instead of being in a hospital bed, in a nursing home. It didn't matter because the way how Congress scores things in the sense of the cost of a bill, it's still repealing the therapy cap costs money. So we always every year had to find money to just for a 1-year moratorium or whatever. So that's always the problem with healthcare, you know, in that regard. So, you know, it's all about priorities and what, and having a voice, and our members, all the other professions, our patients, just bombarding members of Congress saying, you got to do this, you know, because if you don't, I'm not going to have access to my physician, to my physical therapist, to get the care that we need. And so, you know, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I'm not as pessimist. And one of the challenge, I will say this, even though we have bipartisan support, and most of our legislation is bipartisan, is it has become tougher and tougher up on Capitol Hill to get things done.
Yeah.
And it's just because when I first started working in this area, that members of Congress, regardless of what party you are, and you might disagree on things, they still could walk away and still be friends.
Mm-hmm.
Get a beer, you know, go on a trip with their family members. You don't see that as much anymore. You're more considered, if you don't agree with me on the policy, you're my enemy.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing. And this is on both sides, you know, of the political equation. You know, you're so entrenched that you just can't. Sometimes that affects working together for the betterment of your constituents and of our country. So that's the scary thing about, okay, where are we going in the next couple of years? We'll be able to accomplish this. You know, so my hope is that, and the good thing is with some of this legislation I talked about on payment reform, you have what they call the doctor caucus on the Republican side and the Democrat side working together, trying to come up with a solution and move things forward in a bipartisan fashion. So that is some good news.
You mentioned private equities and consolidation. Do you feel, if we're again looking at 2030 and beyond, that this is part of the solution or part of the challenge?
I don't really know
Okay.
in that regard. You know, I mean, it's the choice of, you know, the individual physical therapist and their business. If they want to sell their business and move on, or don't want to have all that extra work that they have to do and just being an employee of that private equity firm and sell to the practice, they are, you know, totally allowed to do that, right? And because there's, you know, less people buying up, right? You know, it used to be, I've talked to other therapists and they said, that was my plan, you know, that would be my partner or someone younger than me
Yes.
who wants to buy. I think that's less and less happening now.
Yes.
For various reasons.
Yes.
And so I don't fault anybody doing that because there might not be any other buyer, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's really good or bad per se. It is what it is, you know, going in, you know, in a sense of going forward. You know, the biggest thing that we care about is, you know, meeting the needs of this country, you know, and access to care doesn't dwindle in any way, and we need to continue to improve it in both, you know, legislatively and things of that sort. You know, like I mentioned before, you know, we have legislation to do with the National Health Service Corps loan repayment program. Basically, if you serve in these underserved areas, then you get help pay off some of your student loans coming out of school. And these are areas that don't have physical therapists in them, or it's hard to recruit PTs to work in this because they don't get paid as much, right, as maybe a suburban area. And so this meets both two needs: get PTs in some areas where there's not many, or it's hard to attract, but also help pay off their student loans. So it's definitely a need in that area. So I'm probably not really answering your original question, you know, but I mean, you know, there is, you know, we just got to make sure that, you know, through this process of, you know, like you said, that access to care doesn't suffer.
Let me rephrase it a little bit. Do you feel that the PEs could have more leverage when it comes to advocacy? They would be able to do a little bit more than private practices independently?
You mean PTs?
PT companies backed up by private equities.
Well, you know, one thing that I think has been great in the last few years that we're really working more closely with the corporates
Okay.
In a sense than we have before, because we all have the same interest. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of all these issues that I talked about previously. And, a lot of these larger courts have big footprints in certain states, right? And so, and they have a lot more clinics in these states. And so it's really important. They might have better relationships
Mm.
to certain members of Congress that we
No,
don't have
definitely.
for, yeah, for whatever reason. So it's really important for us to work together in the sense of trying to get legislators on board and moving issues forward. But I've seen a great improvement in that on various issues regarding payment, false prevention, many other issues that we're working on, and it's been very helpful because a lot of sometimes you get in a box and you don't realize, okay, this affects you, or we need to think about this a little bit differently when we create the legislation, right, that we're trying to push forward. And there might be certain nuances that you just didn't realize unless you have that kind of relationship. But yeah, we're working very more closely with these various groups, and it's been very helpful in the sense of talking as one voice as a whole profession with members of Congress, because members of Congress don't want to hear from the physical therapy profession three different things
Yes.
on a certain issue. Because
Yes.
that just says like, well, I don't, the member of Congress and their healthcare staff is like, well, I don't know who to believe, so I guess I won't do anything.
Yeah. For the smaller practices who would love to continue to survive and thrive beyond 2030, what would be your advice? What do they need to start acting on now if you're giving actionable points?
Sure. My advice would be a couple of things. One, be involved. Know what's going on. And one of the ways to know what's going on, and it doesn't take much, is go to APTA's website. Hopefully you're a member. That's the first thing. Be a member, okay? And then join the APTA Advocacy Network. That's on our Advocacy tab of APTA's page. And through that, you sign up, and what you will get is a newsletter. It comes out every couple months and keeps you up to date on the issues that we're working on Capitol Hill. So you're informed of what's happening, okay? And then whenever there's a time that we need you to contact your member of Congress and send a quick email, takes like 30 seconds basically, we send you a legislative alert and you will be able to send a quick email to that member of Congress on that issue that we've already created. And you can add some additional comments and thoughts on that particular issue if you desire. That's what we need to make sure you're informed, and that also you can educate your member of Congress. I think that's the first and foremost. And if you want to do more than that, you can become a key contact, which basics is you are the point person with that member of Congress and their healthcare staff on healthcare policy. In a sense, you're building that relationship when we provide you the tools to be able to do that. And you call the member of Congress when we send out a legislative alert. You try to meet with them back in the district. We provide you the tools with that and what issues to talk about, just like you did, when you came up on Capitol Hill Day. But this is back in the district. Usually back in the district, they have more time with you, and you actually can see the member of Congress and maybe invite them to a practice visit. Come to your clinic, see it firsthand of how Medicare policy is affecting your patients and affecting your clinic. That's if you want to take that next step. And I know not everybody can do that or wants to do that. That's why we have the Advocacy Network that you can decide to be informed and just do the little things of sending the email in that regard. And I would say the third thing is contribute to the PT-PAC if you're an APTA member, because that provides us the money to go to these fundraisers with members of Congress to talking about the issues that concern the profession. We use this money to go to fundraisers because that's the only time you can guarantee to see a member of Congress, to talk to them about all these issues that affect them and also help out their campaigns. We are we make sure that we give our money to the right people who are working on healthcare policy and also people who have been friendly to our issues in the past. But unfortunately, only about 6% of physical therapists who are members of APTA contribute to the PAC. And so just think if we double that, that's only 12%.
Yes.
How much more money we could do, how much more events we can go to, because unfortunately, APTA dues money cannot be used for going to fundraiser. It's illegal to do that. So that's why we have to ask for a voluntary contribution from our members to be able to go to these events, which is, provides us great access to a members and their congressional staff.
Yeah. Hopefully after this episode, you will get more people to join the 6%. So I guess what I want to say to complement what you're saying, as PTs, we always are trained around patient care. We're very on the offense side. We want to get the patients better. We want to get them out of the door. We want them to get functional and so on and so forth. Lately, through our show and through different conversations, we've been talking a lot about, okay, there is a lot of work that needs to be done on the back end. What needs to be outsourced? What needs to stay in the clinic? What needs to be more efficient? What needs to be tracked? What matrices that we need to look at? I think the extra layer that we learned today that we need to add is to keep an eye on what's happening in the advocacy, keep an eye on what's happening politically, know our representative, know their impact in the communities, show up in their events, show up in our impact, showing our impact in the community, have that voice that could push things forward, because there's a lot of lovely things that will happen by 2030. There is a lot of growth that we're able to see. There is a lot of innovation, enthusiasm, and ambition. But we want to make sure that we're also aware of our defensive side, which is the laws, the regulations, and what happens up at Capitol Hill. So
yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, I know a lot of students that I talk to in physical therapy school, even those who get out, don't realize that they just want to practice physical therapy. And I realize that's what you're trained to do, but just realize there's things going on at the federal level and the state level that affect how you practice, how you get paid.
Yes.
And so you just can't disregard it because it will impact you. So either you want to have a voice and have positive change, or just allow things just to happen to you and have no voice, and it could negatively affect what you do and how you get paid. So I think it's better to be on the other side and really affect policy.
Yes. And have a voice on the right channel too, because us talking to each other is not very helpful. We need to channel our voice in
right
channels as well. Michael, thank you for your precious time. We appreciate having you today and educating us around what happens in the advocacy. We hope that this will get more people to donate, be part of the organization, be part of the advocacy work, and have more key contacts to speak to our representatives and Congress members to push our legislations and our bills forward. Thank you very much, Mike.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
To our listeners, well, if you get the value of that, send it to someone who would benefit from it. Thank you very much for hearing us today. Thank you. I appreciate it.